Hi, I'm Diana Montford, and yes, you know this is the Diana Montford Show. Have I got a guest for you? The father of New York State marriage equality, New York State Assembly member Daniel O'Donnell, more popularly known as Danny O'Donnell, who backed the bill, who sponsored it, who made it happen. Of course, our wonderful governor, Andrew Cuomo, signed it into law as soon as it was passed, but without Danny O'Donnell, there would have been nothing to sign. So there you go. My guest, the wonderful and amazing freedom fighter for LGBT rights, the father of New York State marriage equality, Danny O'Donnell. Hello, I'm honored. I'm thrilled.
It's,
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
it's wonderful to see you again.
Raise your standards. Okay, so talk to me. Tell me all about it. You've entered history. You've changed our corner of the world. You've done a good day's work. Uh, I honestly don't know what to ask you. I mean, you, well, let's put it this way. Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, said, "This has altered civilization forevermore." Thank you. Yes, it has. You know, you can take it either way, you know.
You can, and I was intrigued by some of the conversations where people saying that we were, changing marriage. Well, nothing changed marriage more than
Well, good. Then no divorce.
no
That's
divorce,
good.
right?
Yes.
When we enforced divorce laws, and people said the sky's falling, the sky's falling, the sky didn't fall, and I kept reminding my colleagues in government that a license is issued by the state. At the end of every wedding, the same words are saying, by the power vested in me by the state of New York.
Okay.
It is the state of New York's decision who gets and who does not get a marriage license. And I have not been able to get one. And starting July 24th, my fiance's birthday, we will begin to get licenses in New York.
I think that's great. I think that is absolutely fabulous. I myself have no plans to marry in the immediate future, but I think it's great that I can if I feel like it, you know? Now, you have been working on this quite some time. All the news accounts make it seem as though, oh, look, it happened overnight. How amazing. How long did this overnight success of yours take?
Well, in 2004, when I was newly elected, Robbie Kaplan, who's the smartest lawyer I know, partner of Paul Weiss, called me up and said, that they were going to bring a marriage lawsuit, and they wanted John and I to be plaintiffs. And I said, no, we're not the right people to do that. And after an hour and 90-minute conversation, she convinced me that John, in fact, were the appropriate people to bring such a lawsuit. And so I said, let me talk to John. And John and I went out to this Symposium restaurant on 113th Street, great Greek restaurant in my neighborhood. And we talked about this. And he said to me, we can't be the plaintiffs in the marriage lawsuit because you've never asked me to marry you. So over Retsina and some good Greek food, I asked him to marry me, and he said yes, and we became the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And the lawsuit went all the way to the Court of Appeals, where we lost 4-3. Judge Kaye wrote a brilliant decision about how the Equal Protection Clause of the New York Constitution did in fact require New York to issue licenses, and the majority of the court ruled that we had to go to the legislature. And I thought, well, there's something I know how to do. I'm in the legislature. So Governor Spitzer, when he was elected, promised that he would send a bill to us. And so in the beginning of the Spitzer administration, I negotiated and worked with his staff to come up with a bill to have marriage equality written into law. And at the time, in April of 2007, there were only 24 members of the State Assembly who were in favor of such a notion. And so I went to work. And for the next 2 months, pretty much all I did was talk about marriage. And then June of 2007, 85 of my colleagues voted yes for marriage equality. And please remember, at that time, the polling wasn't what the polling is now. It wasn't even above 40%. And so that really broke loose the possibility that we could get marriage equality in New York. And I've been working diligently ever since to make sure that we could. Finally, this year, we got there.
Thank God, and thank you. And thank, of course, Governor Cuomo and everyone else who had anything to do with it in the marriage equality movement here in New York and the national marriage equality movement. And, there are a lot of people who have made it happen. It wasn't, Danny just deciding one day, hey, marriage equality. But he was certainly one of the main, perhaps the main architect of the law. But there's also that lovely lady, Kathy, I forget her name. What is her name?
I don't know who you're referring to.
Kathy, she's big on marriage equality. Has very short hair. Kathy something or other.
An assembly member?
No.
No.
She's like the head of Marriage Equality New York.
Oh, Kathy Marino Thomas.
That's the
I'm
one.
sorry. Kathy Marino Thomas runs Marriage Equality New York and
Yes.
is a phenomenal advocate and was a wonderful ally from the very beginning. And kudos to you, Kathy. If you're watching, shout out from me. Love
Kathy.
you.
And love your haircut.
Did a wonderful
She
job.
has the best haircut.
She has great hair, yes.
Yeah.
Kathy Marino Thomas and her fiancé are going to get married, and they have a wonderful young daughter, and she has been there from the very beginning, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to her as well.
Yes, and Evan Wolfson.
Evan Wolfson and Brian Elner from HRC,
Oh,
and certainly
so
Ross
sweet. Brian
Levi
Elner,
from the
yes.
Pride Agenda has done a
Yes.
phenomenal job.
Yes.
It was a whole team of people, so I was happy to be part of that team.
Mm-hmm. But you had the power, and you made it happen. So good for
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
Now, you are one of the battling O'Donnells. Your whole family is very strong and very smart. And I'm sure many of you know that one of Danny's siblings is the famous entertainer and also LGBT freedom fighter, Ms. Rosie O'Donnell. And you have 3 other siblings, I believe.
I do. We're one of 5, yes.
Yes, and all are accomplished and successful in various fields. But of course, if you're in the public eye, excuse me, people know about you, whereas if you're successful in another field, they don't. So you've heard of Rosie, but not Danny's other siblings.
That's true. Maureen, Timmy, and Eddie,
Yes.
my other siblings.
And you are completely Irish, I believe.
Yes, my family are 100% Irish background. My father's parents were immigrants from Ireland. They came here in the early 30s. 3 of my aunts and uncles were born in the old country, and 4 of them were born here in New York. My mother was an only child, and her parents married later in life. I think her mother was almost 40 when she was born, which was very unusual at the time.
Yeah.
But her grandparents were immigrants. So we come from entirely Irish stock. That's correct.
Where was your mother's family from?
Well, that was an interesting story. It was part of the Who Do You Think You Are show that my sister did. And she went back to where my grandfather's family was from. It was an interesting story because my grandfather died before my parents married. So I never knew him. My family never knew him. And so we knew very little about that branch of the family. But the Murthas from Jersey City, if your name is Murtha and you're from Jersey City, we're probably cousins. So we learned a lot about my mother's family from that show.
And your mother's family was from where?
I don't recall. No, in that.
Now, your mother, as is well known, passed away when you were a child.
That's true.
You were 12 years old.
I was.
Your mother was a month away from being 39.
Correct.
And I found out just before we started shooting that it all happened very quickly. She died of cancer, but it was fast, wasn't it?
Yeah, we learned later that she had breast cancer that had metastasized. She was never diagnosed with breast cancer. So she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which was a very aggressive form of cancer. And so I'm pretty sure she was, at Thanksgiving at the very least, probably healthy, and maybe by Christmas or around Christmas time knew something was wrong, and she died on St. Patrick's Day in March. So she was not sick for a very long time in her house, but and we didn't learn that it was actually metastasized breast cancer until later on.
And you all cook, don't you? Why don't you tell us why?
Well, when she was dying, she went out and taught each one of us how to make a meal so that we would know how to cook for ourselves. And my sister Maureen called me once when I worked at Legal Aid in Brooklyn, which began in the early, mid-80s. And she had called my little brother at home and said, there's a recipe, index card recipe book. Can you pull that out and pull out that recipe for macaroni salad? And it was elbow macaroni, boil, mayonnaise, salt and pepper. That was the extent to which a 9-year-old kid could learn how to cook. My mother wasn't a particularly good cook, I want to add. She was a very sort of basic bland cook. It wasn't bad food, but
Yeah, my mother was not. Oh, she cooked. You know, that's
if you're
it.
listening, Mom, I'm sorry, but I don't recall it being cuisine. But there was no cuisine. It was the 70s. But
Yeah,
she,
I was going to say that really didn't start until
no,
later.
until later on. But she taught us all how to make something, and that Thanksgiving when I was 12, I cooked Thanksgiving dinner, and when I would tell that story to people, they would say, well, you know, how did you know how to do it? I said, well, I did what she did. And they would say, well, how could you do it? I said, well, the choice was either do it or not have it. And so it was important to me to have it.
It must also have been important to you to just, I mean, remembering the previous Thanksgiving when everything was fun and then it wasn't. It's good to entertain yourself, divert yourself by doing something new that, you know, don't you think?
I think so. And trying to make it appear normal when things weren't normal. You know, please remember this was the early 70s.
Your mother passed away in 1973.
There were almost nobody who was even divorced at the time.
Hello.
Everyone had a father who went to work and a mother who stayed home and took care of the family. So
not in my family, honey. In my family, the father stayed home, the mother went off to work, which is why I'm a tranny. But that's another story. I don't want to be like him.
In Comac, that was what the way things were, and so it immediately created a distinction, a difference that my family was different, and that was.
How did that make you feel when you were, your mother was dying and then she died, and now suddenly you're the kid whose mother died? How does that feel? I know how it feels, but how?
It feels pretty awful, and when you know, a couple of things I can remember. I was in 7th grade and went to the funeral. She was waked for 2 days in a traditional Irish Catholic manner, and then woke up and saw a limousine in my driveway, which frightened me because I had never seen a limousine before, and learned that we weren't driving our station wagon to the funeral. We were going in this limousine, and went and walked into this very large Catholic church, Christ the King Church in Comac, and the entire church was filled with people. Which
she must have been well known.
She was very opinionated. She was the president of the PTA. She was a member of the church council. She had, at the time, a couple of years earlier, the church council did not let women serve on it. And she set out to say, that's not right. So she changed the rules and ran and won. And got the most votes.
Mother, you know? I mean,
so that's what she did. Right, that's what she did. As a woman with 5 kids to take care of, she seemed to find the time to be the president of the PTA and on the church council. And so I won't forget the feeling, because all the funerals I had attended earlier were for elderly relatives, and there was no one there. And to walk into this church and see it filled with people, many of whom were my neighbors and some kids that I knew, I didn't know that was going to happen. And then when I returned to school, she died on a Saturday, and the funeral was a Wednesday, I think. When I returned to school, everyone would whisper behind my back.
What would they whisper?
That's the kid whose mother just died. Because I was new in the school. I had gone from an elementary school to a junior high school, so everyone was talking about this fact, and they actually flew the flags at half-mast on the day she died.
Very nice.
But when you're a little kid, you don't want to be known that way. Yeah. You want to fit in
if you're going to be special in athletics or something.
Right. Not because of that. And then, you know, I had to go home and make sure that there was food to eat. So.
Well, didn't your father know how to cook or anything?
No, my father did not know how to cook, and so this is my story about my father cooking. Shortly thereafter, he decided that he was going to make mashed potatoes, and he peeled the potatoes and then boiled the potatoes and then began to mash them without draining them. And we had to inform him that before you added milk and cream and butter to the mashed potatoes, you had to drain the water. So he was a typical Irish man of his generation. The women did all the cooking. He had no idea how to cook. So at 12, I was a better cook than my father was at 40.
Your father has since remarried, and he's quite happy.
Yeah, he's married, and a woman who's lovely and takes very good care of him, which is very good.
Your sister wrote an amazing story called The Blue Robe, I believe, for the play What I Wore, You know, I read it in More magazine, and I read it 3 times over in succession and was crying. I thought it was, and when poor Carolyn Maloney's husband was buried, Cliff Maloney, just outside the church, I saw you and I ran over and I said, "Have you read that amazing story your sister wrote?"
I had not read it at the time. I have subsequently read it, obviously, and seen the production. My dear friend Julie Halston, who's a phenomenal actress.
Oh, she's brilliant.
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 One of my best friends. So she was in
very cool.
that play.
I love her.
And I went to see the play when she was in it. And when
Vampire Lesbians of Sodom.
That's
yes.
correct. And when she was in it, the woman who read the story that my sister wrote was an African-American woman, and so they changed the story from Ireland to, I think, Jamaica. But it was a truthful story about a bathrobe that my mother wore. That
I know it backwards. Shall I tell it?
No, that's when my father got remarried, which was a decade after my mother had died. He went out and bought my stepmother the same robe that in a different color that my mother wore, and my father was, I think, oblivious to the fact that that was the case, but not oblivious to us. I can't tell you that story is true because I wasn't living at home at that point. I was in college or just out of college, but I do believe it probably is true.
Your mother's death is pretty much the defining event, I would say, of your life, but you say of your childhood. You wouldn't be you if that hadn't happened. You wouldn't be as strong. You wouldn't be... You wouldn't have been the person who made marriage equality happen if that hadn't happened.
Well, I think that's very true. I think there's a couple of different things. One is, certainly in Roseanne's life, we experienced death and life ending very abruptly at a very early age. So there is no sense that you're guaranteed an 80-year ticket on this world. So that was part of what that is. For me, what happened when she died, what I would articulate that now is that I developed compassion. When I was a kid and she was sick, I would walk up the hill from Sawmill Junior High School and see my father's car parked in our driveway at 2:30 in the afternoon and would think, oh my God, she must have died. And then I would think, no, Danny, that can't happen. That can't happen. That only happens to other people. And then when she died, I became the other people, because whatever someone else's problem was could be my problem tomorrow. And I'm not sure how I internalized that, but somehow that was the message, or that was what I was taught by that experience. And so it is that compassion that permitted to me to be a public defender for 7 years and represent people who are often accused of doing very bad things, and knowing that those people have mothers too. And sometimes people get in bad circumstances. And so that compassion I developed as a result of that. And she was a fighter, my mother. She was a real fighter.
Well, she changed the school board.
She did. She changed the board of the church, and she was the president of the PTA, and she was pro-choice, pre-Roe v. Wade, my mother, cool. On Long Island, 1970. Not so easy to be with 5 kids. But she was a woman of her own convictions, and she wanted the best for her children. And the mantra would be, you better make sure you leave the world a better place than when you got here. Mm-hmm. And so it has been my design in terms of life to try to make that so. And so I did that by being a public defender, and then I wanted to be a politician. To help people like you, I got to be a politician. And then now that I am a politician, I got to make this change, and that feels pretty good.
Yeah. How do you top this? President.
Maybe I run for Congress. I don't know. We'll see. Well, I'm so happy currently. I had dinner with an old friend from one of my legal aid days, and she said, well, what do you do next? And I said,
really? How do you top this?
I don't think I'll ever have an accomplishment quite like this, but what I want is mostly to have enough power to improve people's lives. And in this particular case, for the LGBT community, it's access to a license that everyone else gets to have. But there are other ways to improve people's lives, and I'm going to set out and try to do that too.
Can you tell us what some of those ways might be?
haven't figured that out yet. John and I are going to take some time off together. And
John is your husband-to-be?
My fiancé, yes.
Of 30 years?
Yes, we've been together for 30 years.
Now, I have to ask you, how do you keep a relationship going for 30 years?
Well, people ask me where do you meet him. I met him the first day of college at Catholic University of America, so I'm not sure that I would recommend go trolling in dorms. But we were.
Not if you're 40 years old.
No, I'm not 50 now. I was 17. He was 18. We lived down the hall from one another. We became immediate best friends for 2 years before we became lovers. And essentially, the way that happened, it meant that if the intimate part of our relationship ended, I would be losing my best friend. And so we were so inseparable in college that people called us by one name. Have Danny and John been to breakfast yet? Have Danny and John? So we were like one person before we became a couple. Mm-hmm. And in terms of how to keep it together, you know, you have to find ways to keep communication lines open. We've had difficult periods where the communication is not working.
How do you get through those?
We've been to couples counseling, and not lately, but we have in the past. We've talked about how to do that. And, you know, in this particular circumstance, before I ran for office for years, I was the one with the regular job and the health insurance and the vacation pay and all those things. And, you know, I said, and he wanted to be an actor and model. He was very handsome and had done some of that work. And, you know, I said it was my turn. And I wanted to do this. And when I was 7 or 8 years old, I wanted to be a politician, and Roseanne wanted to have a talk show. And so, really. So here we are. She got a talk show, and I'm a politician, and, you know, living the life that we dreamed we couldn't live in Comac.
That would have been circa 1970, and girls didn't have talk shows in 1970.
That's not true. Virginia, what was her
Graham.
name? Virginia Graham. That's right. Virginia Graham. My grandmother used to watch Virginia Graham
used to watch
with Roseanne and Maureen. Yes, Virginia Graham had that show, and my sister was a sassy talkback kind of kid. And
no.
She, really?
Really?
Yes. So she wanted to do that, and when Robert Kennedy was shot,
oh God, yes.
I was 7, and it was the first time I saw my mother cry. And we woke her up and told her that happened. And I didn't know who he was or what he did, but I knew whatever it was must be important and must be something worth emulating. And so I thought I should do what he does. Mm-hmm. So it's Robert Kennedy's life that is responsible for my commitment to public service.
You probably should have been around when your mother heard that JFK died. That was even worse, because that was the first time.
Yes, but I was an infant at that point. I was in diapers, so.
Well, your mother sounds like a unique person. You're very lucky to have had her, even if only for 12 years. I mean, better 12 years with someone that interesting and special than, say, an entire lifetime with someone who doesn't contribute to your development and perhaps detracts from it, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's certainly true. And she certainly wanted for her children, wanted us to be successful, wanted us to be happy, wanted us to succeed. I don't think that she had any, in her wildest dreams, could have imagined that her daughter, named after her, became what Roseanne has become. Mm-hmm. And
Rosie O'Donnell.
And when I began the debate on the marriage bill in 2007, I started by saying that she used to sing Que Sera Sera to me, and that I can't imagine that in 1973 when she died, that she would imagine that her little second-born son would be standing in the State Assembly chamber making an argument like I was about to make, although I'm pretty confident that she'd be proud that I did.
I believe in an afterlife, do you?
I'm not sure.
Don't you ever feel her around you?
I do. You know, but it's more of a warmth is the way I would describe that. Mm-hmm. And when she died, the woman across the street, Leonie Norden, who had 3 kids, sort of became the quasi-mother for us. And so she called her and told her to put on her best frock, because when John dances with his mother, I will be dancing with her at our wedding.
Oh, it's just really awful that this happened to you. I'm so sorry.
you know, it's part of what it is. And, you know, I look back, I'm 50 years old now, and I never thought I would get to live this old because my mother died at 38, not 38, 39. And I have somebody who loves me, and he's very handsome, and he's very successful, and we have a good life. And now that we have made this possible for me and for others, you know, we can go on to other things.
Yep. Okay. If people want to talk to you about marriage equality, if they want to talk to you about their concerns, your district is?
I represent the 69th Assembly District, which goes from 85th Street to 125th Street. I represent part of Harlem, part of the Upper West Side, all of Morningside Heights, and all of Manhattan Valley. You can follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. You have a supporter page on Facebook. And you can email me at the Assembly. I don't have the address off the top of my head. I read all the emails. I've gotten some phenomenal emails from people I've known through my life and perfect strangers in the last week. So if you want to communicate with me, I'd be happy to hear from you.
And the email address?
I don't remember.
Daniel O'Donnell at the Assembly, wouldn't you?
Well, I know that I'm Daniel J. O'Donnell on Twitter. I can tell you that. There's an Assembly website. But if you go to the New York State Assembly and find my picture and hit send email, I'll get that.
Okay. My guest has been the amazing, and I do mean amazing, the now historical figure, New York State Assembly member Daniel J. What's the J for?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Just like John Joseph Banta.
Okay. Daniel Joseph O'Donnell, who has been telling us, oh, he made it out. Marriage equality is a reality now in New York State. Next, the country, next the world. Yes?
Well, the world got there a little quicker than we did. I've always pointed out to people, South Africa allows gay marriage before New York did, but we've got it. We made it done in New York.
Dare I point out that Spain allows gay marriage?
It does indeed.
Yeah.
It does indeed.
I'm not Spanish, but in part Irish. But anyway, my guest has been the truly amazing Daniel O'Donnell, who has changed New York forever in the best possible way, and we love and honor him for it, and we'll always be grateful. And 200 years from now, people will know who you are. And anyway, you know how much I love you, and you know, and obviously you know how much Danny loves you, because look what he did for us all. Anyway, you know how much I love you, you know, even if no one else loves you, I love you, and I mean that. And you know I do. And I want you to take good care of yourself. And now I have to hit the bye-bye button, and I hate it when we have to say goodbye. But the bye-bye button must be hit, because the television station needs the studio. Anyway, I love you a lot. I'll see you next time. My guest, Danny O'Donnell. Love you. See you next time. Bye. I love that too. And she has a gorgeous copper and gold yin yang.
You know what? Bring it to 30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Montford, and yes, you know, this is the Diana Montford Show. My guest is Ms. Lucia Camerata, well-known poet, photographer, artist. I'm going to cough. You keep asking us to have her back. She's back. You like her, we like her. You don't like her, we shoot her. No. You like her, we like her. You don't like her, well, then you'd better be real nice and likable, honey. Anyway, she's going to read us her new poems, and she's going to talk to us all about all sorts of things. And, well, why don't we kill that credit button for the time being?
And
The flashing orange one, there you go.
did.
And why don't we start with poetry so that we can, you know, experience the poetry of the soul.
We certainly will.
Yes.
Okay. This is called the Mass of Paolo Passacaglia. Welcome to the considerations of the up and down girls. Refuse the drink, proxy for the lay